I am the Reading Rainbow Emperor, and today I'm going to be reviewing Galaxy's Edge Retribution by Nick Cole and Jason Anspach. We're finally here. Book 9 in the first season of Galaxy's Edge is read once more, and I can finally review it. While Imperator is creme de la creme, of just the entire series so far. And Savage Wars is that bright star that's up and coming that I so desperately want. Retribution stitches the whole season together. And does it work? This is the last of the first season of Galaxy's Edge, as I mentioned earlier. And what a season it was. Absolutely fantastic, top to bottom. Spoilers will be following for this book, as usual, but it should surprise nobody what happens. Ultimately, if you're not running a story that's so far up its own butt with cleverness as to be, shall we say, ununderstandable, uh, you can kind of anticipate that the Dark Lord will pass on from this world somehow and continue on into the next series. Though there are some great scenes in it, and I'll talk about them in time. The plot is actually incredibly simple. Various characters do their best to undermine Goth Sullus, and Goth Sullus undermines himself and tries to save his empire. Eventually, Sullus does what he needed to do day one, like him murdering the House of Reason, but ultimately the damage is done and his armies are melting away. The sidebar ring on his hand drowns out the remains of his personality and deadens his use of the crux, unless, of course, he, gives in to him. There we go. Caspar, the original personality of Goth Solace, nearly dies and turns into a powerless ghost within his own head, and only Goth Solace remains for much of it. Eventually, the final battle comes, and Legion Commander Chun leads a battalion of Legion irregulars against Goth Sullus and his remaining Cybar war droids and the few members of the Imperial Legion left to him. It's a desperate fight, and Goth Sullus reminds them all that he had the power to be Emperor, but it's not enough. Exo kills Mr. X, which is incredibly satisfying. Yes. But he can't put down the Emperor, sadly. Ray shows up as Goth Sullus tries to open up a portal to the Cybar, and the bounty hunter puts him down for good. Meanwhile, Prisma is dealing with her fears and feelings towards her growth as a character and her recent history with Hutch and the Cybar. It's kind of hard to, get a good assessment of it when you're being kidnapped every book or so. Ultimately, she is given the power to escape as Hutch has been taken over by Cybar technology. Afterward, she and Crash leave for Morgul, where likely she will learn how to use the crux, the quantum, which is actually my preferred term for it. Though I'm sure there's a reason why they call it the quantum and not the crux. I don't know. And return in season 2 or sometime in the future. Honestly, having her show up at the end of season 2 would be absolutely fantastic. But I don't know, I'm not the writer. Retribution almost just comes close to hitting it out of the park. It's a solid home run. It mostly tripped up over scale, in my opinion. While there are some interesting fights within, and the scenes where Gossula starts picking up tanks with his way cool, crazy mind powers and throwing them at the invading Legion force are absolutely amazing. Uh, the previous book was bigger, and now I'm going to show how important it is to do exactly the way that they did it in the book, even though I would have preferred more fleet action and more fighter versus fighter, the stuff I like in the mix. If we were to graph it out, I would have put the climax here, but the size of the action, so there's the climax, right? And I'm using my, there we go, climax thing, right? I should just use a whiteboard. Right, everything's mirrored. Bah. Anyway, if we were to graph it out, I'd put the climax here. There it is. I'm putting it at the book. But the size of the action would actually be in Message for the Dead's last fight, somewhere far above the place I put my copy of Retribution so you could see it in the camera. Like I said, it's just about where it needed to be. What saves the whole thing, despite its dire lack of fleet to fleet combat, is the personal climaxes of the characters within. Galaxy's Edge, while not entirely character driven, is very much a character driven series. Chun becomes the Legion commander he needed to be. Wraith does the right thing for the right reasons unreservedly, without chance of profit for himself. Gauss Solus is no longer Casper. Prisma is off on her own journey to a dark and unknown planet. Exo didn't forget nothing. Mr. X is dead. While I am a firm believer in ramping things up with every book, there comes a time when it becomes necessary to stop the ramp and resolve characters' issues. Personally, Prisma couldn't stay as a child. Mr. X had to die. Gausolus needed to either overcome the sidebar and survive to fight another day, or he needed to give in. Exo needed that resolution he got for the chiasm and all the other stuff he had to go through. Chun needed to accept all his responsibility and really believe in what he is doing. Not that he ever wasn't a legionnaire, but rather as a legion commander, etc., etc. When a writer comes to such a point where the Schwerpunkt of his story is finally at its final moments, where he's built everything up and it's time to pay off everything that he has written so far, a spectacle must give way to the resolutions. Goss Sullus wasn't throwing tanks around. With his mind, it would have been wasted reading, sure, but it was more important that he did what he did. The tanks, being thrown around by his way cool crazy mind powers, were just window dressing, making it so much better. Prisma needed to end her or act on her obsessions rather than being carried around by whoever happened to kidnap her today. The fact that she used icicles like spears is immaterial to that, but very awesome. You know what I mean? I've seen tons of writers trip up here. Most pass into the halls of my dawn memory because life's too short to remember a shitty book. But an outstanding example is Eric Flint and David Drake's Belisarius series. The enemy captured is a capital is captured, etc. But there's these weird scenes of real strategy and that the series is known for that just doesn't work for me, where it did before. There's less cleverness and more waiting out the enemy. Um, the host for Lengthy Evil AI is changed up, and it doesn't have the fights I was kind of hoping to see. Even though its sputtering out is very realistic, like starving out 50,000 warriors is much easier than, fighting them one on one or whatever. It's not necessarily a great climax. Characters were good, but not many of them felt complete by the end, and I just kind of stopped caring about them. They didn't show up in the right ways, and the ending wasn't quite what it needed to be. I own the books, they're very good, but because the ending didn't do it for me, the rest of them became quite dull. If you ruin your ending, you retroactively ruin the beginning. Another book series, a manga actually, that did it very well is Siren. It was about these psychics and other things that got grabbed and sent to another world, um, where they had to complete some challenges and basically get through this obstacle course. And there were opponents and clever stuff, and eventually characters were revealed, and it became less of an action puzzle series and more of a character driven story where time travel was involved, etc., etc. Rather than sputtering out, there was like three resolutions to various characters in various versions of the timeline, and even then they were ramping it up. They introduced us telekinetic who could gather sunlight into lasers, or like the main villain's ability was revealed, and he basically makes a tree of light that can just stab people and suck out their life juices. And in one of the timelines, he and the psychic guy sacrificed themselves to stop this ultimate meteorite that's going to kill everyone, and it's the reason up for all the evil. And in another one, it's stopped before it even gets there, and so on and so forth. All the characters are where they need to be in the timeline that they're in. All the characters are complete. Let's see here. Another series that kind of did it poorly was Kevin J. Anderson's Saga of the Seven Sons, and that's more because he had absolutely scads of characters and a whole bunch of all kinds of crazy things, all kinds of crazy technologies, that by the end of it, I just wasn't really impressed by anything other than the fleet action. Um, and it got to a point where various characters were changed up, they went through arcs and stuff like that, but nothing felt as complete as it needed to be by the end, where they win. It was a good ending. Didn't offend me. um, but it just didn't have that flair that it needed. um, let's see, should I do one last one? Yeah, let's do one last one that did it great. So The Count of Monte Cristo is a really long book, and at the end of it, everything comes together. Various people who wronged Edmond Dantes are imprisoned, insane, or commit suicide. Some are executed. In the anime, um, the man who married Mercedes invades with his fleet and tries to take over Paris under the guise of a liberator. But his soldiers, like, they go along with it at first because he's a genuine military leader. But then they realize he's gone insane after he shoots his wife, and they're like, no, we're getting out of here. The Count has suffered some wounds, but his connection with the guy Shukudo something. Sorry, it's one of those complex Japanese words. Um, is keeping him alive. But certain incidents transpire where his heart starts beating again, and he's slain by something the best friend did a long time ago. But it's already too late. Various characters are going to die. But the Count of Monte Cristo's character, rather than going the full length into evil space vampire, pulls back and remains human, even at the cost of his life. Various other characters die, and there's happy endings and stuff like that. But his character arc finishes in such a way that there's nothing left to say about it. And it is complete. Ultimately, he could not give up his humanity for revenge. And in the normal Count of Monte Cristo, the Rider version, he saves the people who did him good. He preserves all the things he wanted to preserve. But he lost Mercedes and her son, who, of course, the second I need it, I forget it, as they run away with some money and whatever else to avoid the downfall of the military leader. I used to be able to name them. There's Carcarouse, Villefort, Danglars, and it doesn't matter. Point is that the character arcs, while they're different materially, have the same sort of thing. Mercedes is no longer bound to the men she loves, and she's abandoning those things that would drag her down to death, suicide, and ruination. Her character has grown. But Nick Cole and Jason Anspach, facing many of the same character drives, desires, revenge, crazy, way cool mind powers, all that good stuff, did not trip. They stuck the landing. They hit it just right. They knew exactly when and how to cool off and push for the personal ending that made everyone feel complete or well on their way to another story. It's the right mix of due to those who did evil and good and the desire to see what they will have next. And that's damn fine praise. Uh, to all the Legies out there, KTF, and don't forget nothing. I haven't. I also haven't forgotten Vampa. She better live. She better show up in the next one, I swear. Ah, Vampa. Link to Retribution is down in the doobly-doo. Please like, comment, and subscribe as always. Check out my novel writing mentoring course on Fiverr. And you are all wonderful. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Next week I'll be talking about Fantastes.